Okay, let's dive right into this. Welcome to today's Explainer, where we're going to decode the absolute ultimate formula for building a balanced, just massive physique. Look, if you've ever walked into a gym and felt totally overwhelmed by that endless sea of machines or, all the conflicting advice on what actually builds muscle, you are in the exact right place. We're stripping away all that noise today, and we're looking at a very specific, highly curated blueprint. Now, you might be wondering, why should we trust this specific blueprint? Well, it all comes down to this number right here, 6. That is the number of consecutive Mr. Olympia titles held by Chris Bumstead. I mean, think about that. When someone completely dominates the absolute peak of physical aesthetic competition for that long, they aren't just guessing anymore, right? They have literally mastered the biomechanics of muscle growth. So, the million-dollar question is this. Out of all the thousands of movements you could possibly do in the gym, what 10 exercises do you actually need? Like, if you had to distill a 6-time champion's ultimate countdown into a functional everyday blueprint, what actually makes the cut? Well, get ready, because we are counting down from number 10 all the way to the absolute best mass builder. And honestly, that final lift, it's probably going to surprise you. Section 1. Building a balanced foundation. All right, so these foundational choices are rapid and super specific. Starting off at number 10, we've got the standing calf raise. The real secret here is locking your knees and squeezing those glutes to totally isolate the calf, making sure you use the maximum range of motion, all the way up, all the way down. Moving right along to number 9, the dumbbell seated shoulder press. Now, Bumstead specifically chooses dumbbells over rigid machines or Smith machines. Why? Because as you get older, those locked-in machine paths can actually lead to lifelong shoulder pain. Dumbbells just let your joints stack way more naturally. Okay, number 8, the chest-supported row. Guys, this is a massive aesthetic secret. By resting your chest on the pad, you completely take your core out of the movement. And why does that matter? Because if you heavily engage your core on heavy rows, those muscles are going to grow, which makes your waist look blocky. The chest support keeps the waist small and snatched. And coming in at number 7, the incline dumbbell curl. You set the bench back, let the weight hang, it really tests your mobility and forces this incredibly deep stretch on the bicep at the very bottom of the movement. But hey, before we go any further down this list, we've got to pause for a second. We need to ask an absolutely crucial question about how hard you should actually be pushing these exercises. It's a huge debate online, right? You see fitness influencers like David Lade often advocating for stopping before you completely burn out. So, should you always train to failure? Well, listen to this insight from Bumstead himself. I don't do every single set, every single workout to failure. Let that sink in. This is coming from a 6-time Mr. Olympia. It just goes to show that strategic energy conservation is actually the key to surviving a really grueling workout and continuing to grow over time. You gotta save some fuel in the tank for those later sets.
So the absolute crucial point here is understanding the difference between these two concepts. Technical failure, that means you stop the set the very moment your perfect form starts to break down. Absolute failure, on the other hand, means you just keep going. You're using momentum, you're doing half reps, quarter reps, whatever it takes just to completely annihilate the muscle. And look, while absolute failure is definitely a tool you can pull out when you just want to totally kill a muscle at the end of a training block, Chris generally prioritizes stopping a technical failure. It keeps you safe, and it keeps the tension exactly where it belongs.
Section 2. Mastering the deep stretch. Okay, let's break down numbers 6, 5, and 4. Number 6 is the decline dumbbell skull crusher. By doing this on a decline bench, you are constantly fighting gravity, which aggressively stretches that tricep backward behind your head. Then we have number 5, the legendary barbell back squat. But the detail here is just fascinating. Chris actually squats barefoot, spreading his toes out to create a natural arch in his foot. This external rotation drives the knees out safely. And the goal? You drop down until your hamstring literally touches your calf. That heavy, deep range of motion is exactly what builds massive legs. Coming in at number 4 is the lying hamstring curl. Again, the whole focus here is on loading the muscle in that stretched position. He even puts a little yoga pad under his knees to elevate them and get an even deeper stretch. But guys, a massive warning on this one. You absolutely must control the downward movement slowly. Chris actually tore his own hamstring doing this exact movement up in Canada just because he was cold and dropped the weight down way too fast. And this brilliantly illustrates a major pitfall we see all the time in the gym community. If you can't squat deep, you really shouldn't just run over to the machines and ruin your mobility even further. Chris actually jokes about ILS, invisible lat syndrome. It's this hilarious term for that horrible, stiff-armed, hunched-over posture you see gym bros walking around with all because they skipped proper full range of motion leg movements and just wrecked their functional mobility. Seriously, don't be that guy.
Now, of course, if you ask an Olympia champion about the absolute perfect tempo or, the exact right foot placement, you're usually going to get this exact answer. It depends. And it's true. Context always matters in training. Sometimes you really need a slow tempo. Sometimes you don't. You just have to apply the right tool where you actually need it. Now, real quick, let's step outside the gym floor for a second, because to fuel these massive, deep stretch workouts, you need raw material. 6,000. That is the staggering number of daily calories it takes to fuel an Olympian's bulk. It's like eating for 2 or 3 normal people. And get this, even when he's leaning down on a totally miserable prep diet with barely 100 grams of carbs, the protein remains intensely high. We're talking over 300 grams of protein per day. That is quite literally the biological cost of recovering from this kind of intense training blueprint. Section 3. Heavy compounds and joint longevity. All right, at number 3, we have an exercise you might not expect to rank quite so high, the supinated pull-up. So why this one? Well, because we all sit hunched over our phones all day long, right? This movement forces you to fully extend overhead, supinate those wrists, and stretch your entire back. It actively fixes that modern tech posture while building a massive upper back. And then at number 2, the inclined dumbbell press. You want to set the bench at a 35 to 45 degree angle. Now that's definitely higher than most people realize, but it deeply, deeply stretches the upper chest. But listen, the way you actually perform this press is everything. First, you got to keep your elbows tucked in super tightly. Next, retract your scapula, basically pinning your shoulder blades back. And finally, achieve a really deep range of motion, almost like you're rowing the weight back down towards you. See, Bumstead used to press with his elbows flared out, and it actually led to a torn shoulder that required surgery. Tucking his elbows and following these exact steps literally saved his pressing career. So definitely take notes on this one. Section 4. The ultimate mass builder. Okay, we have finally made it. We've covered calves, shoulders, rows, curls, triceps, squats, hamstrings, pull-ups, and presses. So, what could possibly be the absolute most important movement? Out of everything we've looked at today, what is the single greatest exercise for putting raw mass onto the human frame? According to a 6-time bodybuilding champion, it's the deadlift. Now, I know this might actually shock some pure bodybuilding fans out there who view the deadlift strictly as a powerlifting staple, but this heavy compound hinge is just undeniably the king of the gym. As Chris puts it perfectly, it's a single movement that is going to help pack on the most amount of mass. It's just mandatory. It builds your legs, it thickens your back, and the adaptations to your central nervous system provide this immense strength carryover to literally every other lift you do. It's a real game changer. But form really matters here too. And this brings up some incredibly fun banter from our source material today. You've got 2 main styles, right? The conventional deadlift with a relatively narrow stance, a double overhand grip, pulling raw weight right off the floor. This is the ultimate mass builder. And then there's the sumo deadlift with that ultra-wide stance. Chris completely dismisses sumo as cheating. He jokingly says that pulling sumo only increases insecurities. No way, right? So the ultimate advice for the everyday lifter looking to maximize their physique? Stick to conventional, use lifting straps if your grip fails, and just pull heavy. Which leaves us with one final thought to reflect on today. When you walk into the gym next time, are you going to be lifting with your ego, chasing absolute failure with sloppy reps just to say you did it? Or are you going to apply this Olympia blueprint, focusing on longevity, prioritizing deep stretches, leaving just a little bit in the tank, and stopping at technical perfection? Really think about it, because that right there is the fundamental difference between just working out and actually building a masterpiece.